Hello, everyone. Welcome to a closer look at SWELL, intimate conversations with Asian immigrants and children of Asian immigrants who turn their stories into song. I'm Lisa Gold, A4's executive director. And a quick accessibility check. I'm a Hapa woman, half Korean, half white, with dark hair pulled up in a bun, wearing a black sleeveless top. I'm really thrilled to be presenting tonight's program as part of our ongoing celebration of Immigrant Heritage Month. SWELL is a new music song cycle written by 10 composers who are immigrants and children of immigrants, with each song describing some aspect of the composer's immigrant experience. It debuted live and online earlier this year in March in partnership with Here Art Center, and half of the songs in the song cycle were written by Asian American composers with Filipino, Indian, Japanese, and Taiwanese heritage, comprising both first and second generation immigrants. Last week, we presented 3 of those compositions, and tonight we are sharing another 3. And I'm really happy that we are joined tonight by SWELL's producer and lyricist, Melissa Tian, as well as SWELL's music director, Tian Hui Ning, who will facilitate tonight's conversations with the show's composers and singers, Justine Chen, Alok Kumar, Elena Papach, and Kamala Shankaram, who are also here with us. But before I share their introductions, I just need to make a few announcements. Those of you who are familiar with A4 know that we are dedicated to ensuring greater representation, equity, and opportunities for Asian American artists and cultural organizations through resource sharing, promotion, and community building. So tonight's program is an example of how we like to promote and lift up work that is meaningful to our community and which allows us to have these deep conversations about identity and our experiences. So I'm going to share a few Zoom protocols and announcements before we start. We are recording this program for our YouTube channel, and we'll be posting it later. If you have any questions, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom menu and type the question into the box. There will be a Q&A session at the end of tonight's discussion, and we will do our best to get to all of your questions. We have closed captions available via Rev. So if you would like to enable those captions, again, at the bottom of your Zoom menu, you should see a CC icon that has the words live transcript below it. So just click on that icon to enable those captions. I want to thank everybody, especially Priscilla-san, who is our Programs and Communications Manager, for their help tonight. Please do us a huge favor. We're going to ask you to fill out a post-event survey, and that's because we want to hear from you. We are always trying to improve and shape our programs so that they can be more relevant and exciting and interesting to you. So your input matters. If you want to share an idea for a future program, you can do that. Just let us know, fill out the form. Priscilla will share the link in the chat box, and we will also send it to you after tonight's event. A few upcoming programs that I want to share with you. On Wednesday, July 14th at noon, we're presenting our second Grow with Google workshop. And this is for artists. It's called Grow Your Audience with YouTube. It's a free workshop that will help you boost your online presence. So sign up for that. Priscilla will share the link as well. Town Hall is back. For those of you who are familiar with Town Hall, you know it's a great way to connect with the Asian American creative community. And on July 20th at 6:30, we will be celebrating all things film related. July and August are big film festival months. So we want to know about those and share them. So please sign up for that if you want to pitch or just attend. That's great. We have rescheduled Open Kimono, which is a conversation with artists Pixie Lau, Grace No, and Angela Y at Photographiska. That's going to take place on July 27th at 7 p.m. And that is a series of talks in conjunction with Pixie's exhibition at Photographiska. And this one is going to focus on branding and identity in the age of digital, in the digital age. So we have discount tickets if you are interested in attending that. It's going to be in real life in the beautiful museum. And then on Friday, the 30th, we are so excited to present The Memory of Water, which is a new performance featuring Ravish Momin as Sunken Cages, and our virtual residency artist, Migi Miyajima and her quintet in partnership with the Restart Stages program at Lincoln Center. So we will have tickets available for our A4 family. They are free, and that we'll share a link for that starting July 16th. So check back on our website for that information. And for all of you artists out there, sign up for the $5,000 City Artist Corps grant. The next there are 3 application cycles. First one is done. The next one opens July 6th. And it closes July 20th at 10 a.m. So the sooner you get your application in, the better your chances of getting that money. A4, we will be holding an information session on Friday, July 15th at 1:00 p.m. Other organizations are also holding workshops to help you answer any questions. So just do it. Get your application in there and get that money. And then for all you arts administrators out there, we are also hosting a webinar for the National Endowment for the Arts for their American Rescue Plan grants. And that will take place on Wednesday, July 21st. This is only for 501c3 arts organizations. And we'll have more information about that on our website very shortly. So, as always, thank you to our supporters at Capital One, Con Edison, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council, the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Tiger Foundation, and so many generous individuals who are helping make this program possible. And I want to give a very special shout out to Council Member Margaret Chin, who is from Manhattan's District Number 1, and her incredible staff for their support of tonight's program through the Cultural Immigrant Initiative. And if you would like to be among our list of supporters or just want to donate anonymously, we'll take that. You can text the letter A, the number 4, and the word donate to 202-858-1233. And you can pay with Venmo or Apple Pay, or you can donate through our website. And now I would like to offer a brief land acknowledgement, because before the pandemic, we would be meeting in the A4 offices on the unceded lands of the Lenape and Canarsie peoples. But since we are meeting virtually, I would like to share a digital land acknowledgement written by Canadian theater artist Adrienne Wong. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We're using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art that we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all of this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good use of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. And now, I would like to introduce tonight's participants. Melissa Tian is a playwright, lyricist, librettist, and producer. She produced and contributed lyrics to SWELL, and she is a resident playwright of New Dramatists and has an upcoming production at Jack in Brooklyn this fall. Tian Hui Ning is the music director of the Victory Players and Whitesnake projects and has premiered works by numerous Pulitzer and Rome Prize winning composers. And this September, he'll be music directing the live virtual opera, A Survivor's Odyssey, The Journey of Penelope and Circe. Composer Justine Chen has been commissioned by New York City Opera, the New York City Ballet, Juilliard, American Lyric Theater, Jack Quartet, and Opera America, among others. She has received a number of prestigious grants, and she received the 2020 Female Discovery Grant from Opera America for a new work about her mother's family called Seven Sisters. Alok Kumar is a tenor who has developed a career throughout the United States and abroad, appearing with the Metropolitan Opera, the Los Angeles Opera, the Royal Opera House at Covent Garden, and the London Philharmonic Orchestra, among others. A proponent of new music, he has collaborated with multiple composers in song, opera, and oratorio. Elena Papach is a composer, director, and interdisciplinary artist from Japan and the United States. Her compositions house the languages of dance, theater, sound, and image. And her performance work has been presented internationally in Europe, Japan, and the US. And she is currently working on a chamber opera called Person. And last but not least, Kamala Shankaram moves freely between the worlds of experimental music, creative music, and contemporary opera. Known for her work with emerging technologies, recent premieres include Only You Will Recognize the Signal, a serial space opera performed live over the internet, and All Decisions Will Be Made by Consensus, an absurdist opera performed live over Zoom. So thank you, performers. And tonight's live program is featuring ASL interpretation by Jody Prysock and Lorelei Martinez by A Total Caption. And ASL interpretation of the songs is provided by Jose Gomez, Justine Rivera, and Kathleen Taylor in consultation with Alexandria Wales. So thank you all. Take it away, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's so wonderful to be here. Oh, my goodness. You know, one of the things that I love telling about SWELL is how I came to even conceive of the idea of having 10 composers who identify as immigrants and children of immigrants writing music, you know, and being part of this program. So I will take us back to 2018. A friend of mine invited me to a new music festival, and I love new music. I had such a good time. Right in the middle of it, there was one composer, performer, who performed a song that she had written about her mother's family. She's from Haiti, and she had gone back to Haiti. She had spent time with her mother and her mother's family and all the women that were part of that family. And she wrote a song about it, and she performed the song, and it like rearranged my DNA. For the time that I was listening to this song, I just thought, wow, new music can do this? I want to hear more of this. And then so I thought, where is this? I'm in New York City. There must be more people making music like this. And I looked and I looked and I couldn't quite find it. So then I thought, well, what if I found composers who are interested in making music like this and put together a program? Maybe I could just create it if it doesn't exist. Now, of course, it sounds simpler the way that I describe it than it actually was, because when I had the idea, I pitched it to Here Art Center, and they said yes, but they also said, and can you do this in the next 4 weeks or so? And I thought, okay, maybe. Then I thought, well, I'm gonna have to put together a budget. I'm gonna have to contact composers that I don't necessarily know. I'm gonna have to reach out to a lot of different people. I'm gonna have to do this very fast. So I mean, just in terms of the people that that are here tonight, the composers that are here tonight, Justine, I got in touch with through the director of SWELL, Elena Papach, and Kamala, I knew because I met her at a residency. And Elena, I got in touch with because we were both attendees at a larger event. And so this is sort of like, there are so many different avenues, but I was very lucky. I was very, very lucky that I was able to collect 10 names, and all of the people that I contacted said yes. And I thought, okay, 10 songs is a good number of songs. I can make an evening of that. And so what I did was I used all the money in my savings, which was not very much. I will tell you that right now. I emptied my savings. I told everybody, this is what I can give you now. But if we can do a workshop and it turns out well, then I can get more money for a full-fledged production. And that's what happened. We did the workshop in 2019, and then I got money from the New York City Women's Fund for Music, Theater, and Media. And they gave me enough money to put on a full production. Now, this happened right when the pandemic hit. And they said, if you want to, you can delay your production until we can gather in person again. I thought that seemed reasonable. And then the pandemic was going to last a very, very long time. And then I thought, what if we put this online? And initially I thought, what's the difference, really? Little did I know. So then suddenly I was online looking at green screens, at microphones, at in-ear monitors, sending all of this equipment to singers who had never in their lives had to use this equipment, let alone set it up in their apartment while I'm Zooming with them and explaining, okay, this piece goes with this piece. I mean, I never pictured myself doing that. So then that's what happened. We put on this show, everybody had their setup, we did rehearsals, all of this was live, all of it was remote. Some of us have never met each other in person. And that's the origin story of SWELL. And one of my favorite things about SWELL is the fact that everybody's story was so different. One could say, how different can immigrants be from each other? And my answer is as different as any human being is from the next. And one of my favorite origin stories in terms of how the song came to be is Kamala Shankaram's song, A Friend in the Zorro. Kamala, could you give us a little bit of history in terms of how the idea for the song came about?
Yeah, so Melissa asked me if I would be interested in making something for this project, and she very graciously volunteered to write the text for it, but that it should be something that was personal to me. And my dad is from southern India, and he came here in the early 1970s, but he never talks about that. He has never until this moment talked to me about what it was like coming from southern India. And I knew very little about that whole journey for him. I knew that in India, especially at the time, you can complete your schooling very quickly. So he had finished his medical school degree or his college when he was 16, and his medical school by the time that he was in his early 20s. And then I knew that when he had come to the United States, he came directly from southern India to Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. So I thought that he was going to tell me this story about the climate and how the snow was and all of that. But instead, it was this whole other story about this secret dream that he'd had of becoming an actor that I didn't know anything about. So it took this turn that I would never have known this side of my dad without this project, which I'm actually really grateful for. So thank you.
That's so wonderful. You know, I remember when you interviewed him and you sent me the transcript of the interview, and it was like 20, 25 pages, and you said, I don't know, there's a song here. And I looked at it and I was thinking, are you kidding me? There are like 15 songs in this transcript alone. And well, the one part that stood out for me was this part about him pining after this career that he never got to pursue. And I think that we can maybe play the song now and you'll get a sense of what that was for him.
As a boy, I could see myself on the movie screen, along with pretty places, pretty people wearing fancy clothes, speaking fancy words. I believed in make-believe. I believed. But my father did not believe. He did not believe in me. As a man, nephrology was my occupation, setting in motion a journey from Andhra Pradesh to California. I journeyed for my father, but I still believed in make-believe. I believed. He still did not believe in me. One day I drove from home to Hollywood to see for myself pretty places, pretty people wearing fancy clothes, speaking fancy words. They were not as I remembered, merely sets, actors, costumes, and scripts. How could they be so artificial? Is this what I once believed? In my field there is only truth. In life, in death, in pain. In my field I am true to my patients. I tell them what I know. I tell them I believe in them. I believe, and they believe in me. In my field I am true to my patients, except for that time I dressed as Zorro. That time I dressed as Zorro to make them smile. A pretty cape, hat, shirt, and mask. I was wearing fancy clothes, speaking fancy words. They forgot where they were and asked me for my autograph. That day I was a doctor no more. I was a friend and a Zorro. I've been a friend and a Zorro. Movies may be bright and synthetic. Technicolor dreams may fade, exposed to reality. But I have come to believe. I believe saving life is a kind of art. Saving life is a kind of art, a kind of art, of art, of art.
So wonderful to see that performance again. Of course, Alok is with us today. You know, what's interesting about that song is it's the only song in the collection of 10 songs that is based on a real person, and it takes the events and the emotions of a real person, and all of that gets interpreted through the song. Now, there's another song that we're about to see that I worked on with Lena. And Lena, if you would tell us a little bit about the process that you and I had in creating this song, because it's biographical, but in a different way. Could you talk about that?
Sure. I feel like when you approached me, I kind of actually didn't know how I felt about my experience or how to put it into words. And it was a little bit, the subject was a little bit at arm's length, but at the same time, it's kind of like I wanted you to give me something to work off of to provoke, you know, for me to discover like how I felt about it. And music was a perfect way to explore that because in my life I grew up here as a half, I was born in the US, and then at 5 I went to Japan, but at Japan I was also half American, and then 14 I came back here. So I've been uprooted many times, you know, at a very formative age. And I kind of always think of, you know, like you're like a tree and you grow your roots, and it's been like yanked so many times that my existence is kind of like this floating person and very hesitant to be definitive about anything, including this. So I just wrote you like a bunch of stuff about me, like what I things that I feel, things that happen to me, kind of like a big. I wanted the story not to be about me, but to be told through other people. And that's kind of what I gave you. And then you came back with kind of a frame of like situations, like, you know, solid situations that I could work with that were contrasting. And when I was given those, I also kind of didn't know where to go. But this feeling in me that I actually wanted it to be about my experience started getting stronger. I drew a lot from the singers, how I could see them in these situations, what, you know. So it's kind of like it was a slow reveal of how I felt about this subject through your filtering through your mind, Melissa, and also through the singers. And yeah, I think it was, you know, I'm a big procrastinator, so it was like, you know, weeks before it was done, I was like in it, and I realized that, you know, there were dormant feelings that were under, you know, that was under everything. And yeah, you helped me reveal it through our process.
One of the remarkable things about this particular process, this particular song, is that you had done research on the singers. I thought that was so great that you went to their websites, you looked at the different performances, you looked on YouTube, and from that, you gleaned a little bit of their personalities their proclivities, their capacities, and you put all of that into your song.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was such a beautiful thing to do.
Yeah, well, it was, it was helping me. You know what I mean? It was helping me they were giving me clues. Everything that was happening that was giving me clues to what the song is. So, yeah, it wouldn't have happened without, after it was made, I feel like Tian and the singers really expanded it more, you know what I mean? So what you'll hear is really a result of like the core of it, the music and everything, but it feels like a song that came from like many directions. It didn't follow like a straightforward logical trajectory. It was very much back of the mind.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. Let's take a look at the song.
This skin wraps me in a space of my own. Words that leave my mouth just fall to the floor. 9 years since I carried you. I wrapped you in my skin. Your breath is my own. You changed your mind and slipped away. I watched you get picked up by someone else's fingers.
just a little bit alive. No voice of our own. I would not say that my life is null, but why not me instead of you? The sky tries to pull me up through the night, but they told me that I have to stay. Oh, crawling back to life I call my own, holding in my heart the day that I will get to kiss you again. Where is my body? Where is my home? Is my home my body? Well, I'm here all alone, so I'll go where it goes. I'll want what it wants. I'll talk what it talks. And I love what it loves, and I breathe because of you, and I breathe because of you, I breathe my heart the day that I breathe my heart the day that I'll get to see you again.
And the voices that you just heard were Mimi Hilaire, our soprano, Justine Chen, our mezzo-soprano, and Ricardo Rivera, our baritone. Some people ask about the video design because that one, that song in particular showcases the talent and skill of Jeanette Oy-Suk-Yu, who is our video designer. You know, the thing about that song, it's like it's a great mix of very specific vignettes, as well as the emotional impact of the disconnect that Lena was feeling and talking about, you know, when she and I would discuss what it felt like for her to be somebody who was caught between two different worlds. And some of that, I think, is what I love about Justine's piece. Because, you know, Justine, you can talk about this a little more, I'm sure, but one of the greatest achievements, I think, of your piece is that you were able to incorporate all of the singers, and yet the piece, one would think that something that has all of the singers would be like big and busy and you know, like a huge number, you know, show-stopping number. And I think that what you were able to do was kind of keep it a self-contained yet still remarkable piece of art, you know. And it was show-stopping, certainly, but in a different way. You know, it wasn't a big flashy number. It was so inwardly powerful. And I love that about this piece. Could you talk about the genesis of that piece a little bit?
Thank you, Melissa, for those really your compliments. Really yeah, I feel like this song and all of it, all of those feelings were just, you know, buried really far down, and it was our conversations that really brought it up, because before we met, before we spoke, no one had ever asked me about what it was like to be the child of an immigrant, what that meant, you know, or at least to me, what it meant to me. And when you sent the email, I was in such a crazy moment of my life. You know, I'm like a mountain. I don't like to move. Like, I'm not like, you know, the wild animal that needs to run everywhere, or the wind. I just like to stay put. And I've lived in New York my whole life. And then I was about to move to Connecticut, which isn't that far. Honestly, it's not that far, but it felt so far away. And additionally, I lost my father a few years ago, a few years before then, and I was thinking a lot about him, and how he will have never been to the place I was moving. And I was like working on getting a mortgage. It was such an emotional moment for me. It was so difficult. But I was like, yes, I'll do the song. I'll do the song. Because I just really, it was such a meaningful topic. And I didn't know, again, how meaningful it was until you started asking about it. But all I could think of at the beginning was just stories of kind of rejection and violence and hate. Those were the feelings that I had about that. But I didn't want to stay there. I'm sorry. I didn't know that I would start crying, right? But it's this very emotional thing, you know, because
I remember that conversation that we had. I remember how you were working through your thoughts and your emotions while we were talking that first time. And I also remember you saying that you didn't necessarily want to stay in the dark place, that you wanted somehow to convey that there was a desire for change, a desire for something different, a desire for a different kind of existence. And I feel like that's kind of where you ended up with the song.
Yeah, you know, when you write music, or I guess when you write anything, you have to just really be living in it. And I did not want to immortalize that feeling of, or that the pain that I was feeling. Maybe another time, you know, but not right at that moment. I couldn't. I just didn't have it in me. So I really just tried to focus on the yearning that I have, and I think that my family might have somewhere in them. I don't know how they did it. They're amazing people. I don't know how they came here and just, despite everything, kept moving forward, working really hard, and not ever complaining, just moving ahead. So yeah, that's instead of writing a song that was more like a story, which was my initial impulse, I have my first set of songs was the very first song, it was kind of similarly like a list. It was a list, and that this list was a bunch of infinitives, you know,
Wow.
and then really breaking down the idea of longing and belonging and
Yeah,
being.
it's wonderful. Well, let's have a look at the song, and then we'll come back and talk some more. Yeah. You know, one of the things that strikes me every time I see this song, and actually all of the songs, is how different the styles are from each other. We saw 3 of the 10 songs, you know, and they're all so different. And one of the things I would love Tian and Alok to speak to, actually, because the two of you really, really experienced the full range of music, and you had to rehearse every single song and then you perform it every single night. I mean, what was that like? what was that like for Tian to go back and forth between different styles, and Alok, what was it like for you to keep it all straight and understand, you know, which song goes with which style and how to approach it as a performer?
I'm gonna let Alok start first because I have so much to say. I will just keep on going, you know?
That's fair. I'll keep this brief, I guess. That works out well. Well, first of all, we were lucky. I think all of us as musicians, as the singers, we were super lucky because we had fantastic, I mean, just fantastic works, right? They were so individual. There was, and I guess, you know, you alluded to it, Melissa, earlier on, is that there's just not this, you know, the immigrant experience is not a monolith, right? It's not monolithic. There's so much diversity within it, and even amongst groups that might be from the same region or same area, while they have shared histories and shared interests and shared cultural aspects to a degree, you know, it's an individual experience. The hardships, you know, how they deal with them, what they face, whether depending on the communities they live in, right? So I guess that all of that was so clearly indicated in the notes on the page. And it was a living, breathing entity because the thing that I love so much about making new music and working with composers is that, you know, you get a suit that's tailored to you. You're not buying something off the rack. So while I love standard rep, and you know, there's of course, you know, there are yardsticks and standards by which, you know, they tend to measure artists and singers and what have you. The ability to have this, you know, the sense of developing and bringing and really injecting a part of who you are as an individual and have that recognized by the composers who want to, you know, truly collaborate is a remarkable thing. So Justine, Kamala, you know, unbelievable, just working on all the pieces and having that opportunity. A large part of the stylistic differences for me were, my ability to kind of bring some of those and stay true to some of those was thanks in large part to Tian. He was dogmatic about making sure that the styles were respected, that there's a sense of how to do it, and you know, and didn't shirk from the responsibility that he had to, you know, call us out and say, hey, you know, there's a little bit too much this, or this kind of brings in a little bit too much that, and maybe this isn't quite, you know, the feel of what it is, right? So whatever it is you want to bring to the forefront in terms of how you want to emote, let's make sure that it's true to the style. So to have him as this conduit was, you know, something that was absolutely invaluable. So thank you. I guess generally I absolutely, you know, doing style, especially doing musical theater, doing straight tone. Straight tone, I've done a fair amount as a baritone in choruses and choirs. And it's a convention which really allows you to not only blend, but also to kind of bring out different colors, different feels, different emotions without the sense of, you know, having to live within the structure of, you know, first and foremost is a connected vocal apparatus, and then we kind of play within that, right? It's just a broader spectrum that it allows you to have. So the straight tone convention is something I was familiar with. The musical theater convention I was a little less familiar with. It had been a while since I'd done musical theater. And, you know, the last time I really did it was probably in the shower or at karaoke. So, you know, a lot was forgivable because you're usually downing a few and the people that are listening to you are downing more than you are, which is a good thing. So even though I absolutely loved that style and it was something that, you know, it's kind of a guilty pleasure, I knew that it wasn't something that quite, you know, it's not something that I was kind of, that it didn't quite fit like a glove. But again, being able to do it with Tian's guidance and have him kind of help me out in terms of achieving the things I wanted to achieve and do it stylistically in an unoffensive way, you know, that was a huge plus. So I just, you know, it was definitely, for me, it was definitely a wonderful journey on every level. And it was made all the more wonderful and all the more, you know, just easy because of the team. So, yeah.
I was going to chime in here and say that, you know, this whole work, this whole event I just wanted to also say I really very much share Justine's feelings. I think, you know, when some of those first incidents were coming out, there was this moment of non-comprehension, like almost denial. And then about 2 days after I think it was Haiting who first mentioned it to me, I kind of had this moment, and this moment of terror. Actually, I didn't leave my house for about 48 hours, you know, and then it kind of like, you know, got through things through this project, you know. So I just wanted to also say, you know, what an amazing privilege it is to get to work with such an amazing group of people, and to, like, you know, and to use art and music to get through that. It's just, it was really, really a precious experience for me. And I think, you know, that's one of the things where I felt, you know, I cared so much about the different voices and how each composer spoke, and how to try to make sure that their compositional voice and their vision came about. And then sometimes it's very interesting, because here we are dealing with different, the whole point in a way is that all these immigrant stories are coming together to America, right? And they're coming with such rich differences. And I find myself, you know, when we're dealing with the Zorro piece, with Kamala's piece, that, you know, there was this reference, for example, to either Vina or Sitar kind of doing this plucked and pitch bend thing. And I just remember just going, that's brilliant. Why haven't I heard people do that before? You know, and I still remember listening to Bright Cheng do something like that with the cello suites that he wrote for Yo-Yo Ma, and, you know, just finding that. And it's also, we spent all this time talking between Alok and Kamala about this, ya da 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 dee da dee da dee, right? Do we do a light sound kind of straight tone version? Do we do an operatic version? Ya, ya, or do we do almost even like, you know, like kind of Carnatic Hindustani, for example, right? And you do that kind of vocal production with the kind of gliss between the notes going back, like, you know, where should we go? Like, you know, and when I look at something like this, I'm like, wow, this is so rich, because it comes from all of these things. It could actually be all three of them. Let's talk to the composer and let's figure that out, right? And I think one of my my mentors used to say, well, you know, I hate doing early music. That was him, not me. I hate doing early music because I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because we all know what to do with Beethoven. We're not quite sure what to do with composer X, right? This might be the first piece that they've ever written like this. And it just takes a whole lot more time. It takes a lot more conversation. So you kind of need to have to be somebody who enjoys that process of calling somebody out and going like, you know, what were you looking for here? You know, and I see Kamala smiling, so I will let Kamala speak.
But I think that's one of the fun things about making a new piece, is that you also get to hear input from the people interpreting the piece. And what makes this project special is there's no translation, right? When we talk like having a look seeing this piece, and I say this is Kaherwa in the cello here, or this is, you know, this is a gamaka or whatever, he knows what that is, and I don't have to explain the sound, you know. Whereas always, even for somebody who, or maybe even especially for somebody who's mixed like me, there's this sort of negotiation of the different spaces that you're in, what vocabulary do you use, what kind of a background can you assume, how do you translate, whereas this was seamless, there was no translation. So that's something else that was really special.
And if I just might add just one last thought about that, but, you know, I also feel that because of these immigrant riches, but it's not just that, it's also the wonderful richness of all the stuff that's happening in electronic music, in popular music right now. And you know, I actually went to pull out Lena's piece, because, you know, I just remember that she had written this line here. It says at the opening, where when Mimi sings, "This skin wraps me in a space of my own," and above it, there is information for us to interpret, and it says alone, sensual, blues-like, right? So that's a lot to unpack, right? You know, how do you create that? And then to me, it's like, okay, you know, we're on this online platform. There are all kinds of things that we can do that we normally can't really do as well on stage. So for example, we could close mic somebody, right? We can close mic somebody, and so you feel like you're like right next to them. You can feel the intake of breath, the intimacy of them about to articulate a sound. And then, you know, and that is going to give it that kind of that closeness of how isolated, hearing the kind of white noise of the space, hearing the brush of fabric, that's going to help us convey that sense of it. And then I was just thinking, I started exploring with our singer, with Mimi, about, what are some kind of like the blues sounds that she could make. And then so we did all kinds of like, things. And even for her, it was interesting because even though she sang some of that music, it's like literally a split personality. It's like a different person sings that. And now you want me to bring it together. And we're still towards the end of the piece, you want me to transit into classical and then come back into it. That was like a whole different thing. So I just want to say it's not possible without the wonderful team we have. But it was also a lot of fun communicating with everybody and just figuring this out. It was one of the most kind of involved things we did that period of time, and thank goodness we had that to kind of channel our energies and attention to.
Yeah, I agree. I so agree. This team, it's hard to imagine doing this project with a different set of people. Really hard to imagine. I mean, at the same time, we're all different, very, very different individuals. We come from so many different backgrounds. And actually, one of the things that I would love for you all to talk about a little bit is how you all came to music to begin with. What is your origin story when it comes to making music? Tian, if you don't mind starting, because I find your story particularly delightful.
Well, I in the last episode of this, so I feel like all of this, all life's TV now, right? So all of this is TV on YouTube. So I'm gonna not repeat myself, but I'll say another kind of starting story, which is my fascination with singing and the different kind of singing styles and how I got involved in the first place. And I credit the University of Birmingham in the UK where I studied for this, because they said in order for me to graduate as an orchestral conductor that I had to give a recital conducting a choir. And that was absolutely terrifying to me because I'd never done that before. I never sung a single thing. And I come from a kind of Taoist Buddhist background, so I didn't even sing hymns. So I remember I showed up for my voice lesson for the first time and they were like, so what can you sing? And I was like, can you sing a hymn at least? And I was like, well, I don't really know any hymns, and I don't, I know a couple of things. And I said, you know what I can do is I love Ella Fitzgerald. So I'm going to scat some Ella Fitzgerald for you. So I sang some Ella Fitzgerald covers, and then I sang a Bach cello suite in scat, because that's what I knew. I was an instrumentalist, right? So, and that's how it all got started. And it was this, like, even from the get-go was a question of translating, all right, I'm a pianist and a trombone player, and how can I take that and make that into a singer's world and make sense of that? So I think, there are many here who are multi-instrumentalists and who can identify with that translation process.
Now look, you have a sort of interesting background because you have straddled two cultures all your life also. Does that inform how you came to music at all?
Well, actually, it's kind of, I think I did it despite having come, the child of immigrants to the U.S. In South India specifically. I was born in South India and then came to New York because my parents decided to come, and because I was about 3 years old, I really didn't have a choice. So I ended up in, Poughkeepsie, New York, and that's where I grew up. And but for me, and I mean, I guess it's kind of, to a degree, it's kind of, informs my sense of how I think about things, because philosophically or metaphysically, what have you, because I found it very early. I was singing in the car, and there was all kinds of random stuff. My parents, by the time I was 5, 6 years old, they figured that they would send me to, voice lessons, a half hour, one day a week, to get it out of my system, along with everything else. And maybe I'd stop bothering them in the back of the car. And that kind of, turned into my singing my first opera when I was 8 in the chorus, and then singing, my first solo role as Amal when I was 11. And then I just never gave it up. Even as my voice changed embarrassingly late, I still maintained. I still kept, singing through it all, and ultimately went to school for it. And it was something that was a big part of my life and who I was, how I self-identified. And it allowed me to kind of, I guess it kind of served a broader function because it was so rarefied that it was something that, even though I felt like an outsider anyway, it would allow me to kind of become a chameleon within the confines of the arts world and within the confines, especially of the operatic world, and be able to kind of take on any number of you know backgrounds and heritages and what have you, and just kind of throw myself into that. So I became this ambiguous, even through the course of it, there was this ambiguity as to kind of like what I was, and I never really you know obviously I was South Indian, but there were so few South Indians in opera at the time, and still grossly underrepresented. But for me, I was kind of able to wear these different masks. So I guess to make a short story very long, that's kind of how I found it. And then when I tried to get away from it and try to live a different kind of life after I stopped singing for about 7 years and took on a different pursuit, I ended up finding my way back to it, but as a tenor as opposed to a baritone. And so that's kind of how I've been living my life for the past 10 years now. So it's kind of certain things you just can't. I guess they at some point they tell you who you are, and either you choose to kind of deny that, or you're like, all right, let's figure out a way to make you part of my life.
Yeah. So true. It's so true. Art seems to do that with us, huh?
Yeah.
Kamala, speaking of wearing different masks, I feel like, Kamala, you have expertise in so many different styles, and I'm so curious, actually, how you came to music yourself, and which of these styles, maybe more than one, were part of how you came to be a musician.
I mean, I think it's a very similar story, So, I mean, I have one South Indian parent, and the other is American, a white American. And so, like, my association with music very early on was my mom's side. My dad's side had nothing to do with music. My mom's side, my grandma taught piano and played organ in church, which we didn't go to church when I was a little kid, but that's a whole other thing. So all of my musical sort of my experience with music was associated with my mom and not with my dad when I was small. So that was piano lessons, which I took because of my grandmother. When my parents got divorced, everything was choir with my mom, musical theater with my mom. My dad, while we listened to Carnatic music in the car, that was the extent of it. And it wasn't until I was much older that my grandfather bought me a sitar, and that's when I started to study Indian music seriously, because he wanted me to. He asked me to, since he knew that it was something very important at that point. But so I was not supposed to be a musician, and that, even now, like, my dad, I think, has come to terms with the fact that that's what seems to have happened. But my doctorate is not in music; it's in cognitive psychology, because that's something that is acceptable to a South Indian parent. For years, he would say, it's not too late to go to medical school in the Caribbean; they'll still take you. So it's been interesting, because I think that for Indians in particular, there is no real connection to the European classical tradition, despite the fact that so much of Bollywood music borrows from it because of colonialism and all of that. But that's a whole other story. I am sorry, Jody, that I am going so fast. So. I think it's been this very winding path towards finding a way into it, but I think it's important that all of us are here, because that's what gives it meaning and gives it relevance. Still, is allowing the canon to expand and to take on new flavors, and to be more encompassing of the classical musics from other parts of the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Elena, speaking of people whose family members were musicians and influenced their careers, could you tell us a little bit about how you came to music?
Yeah, well, my parents were both musicians, but people are always like, oh, that's so great, your parents are in music, but they were very much on opposite poles of, their belief in music. My dad was a composer, and my mom was a breadwinner, flutist in the orchestra. And I think she was like, you gotta play your instrument and don't be a composer, you know, like, because there's no money, and like, you know, so there was this instrumentalist side of the family, and then there's my dad's side, who was also instrumentalist, but he hated the orchestra, and you know, he composed at home. Yeah, I think I mean, I was never schooled in composition. I kind of found my own way through improvisation, but now that I think about like writing for voice, my dad was a very big influence. He wrote an opera while I was young. Basically, my whole elementary school, he wrote an opera based on the story by O. Henry. And so we lived in these tiny apartments. And then, you know, I come home from school, and he would ask me about like how I would stage it, or how I would, you know, make the lyrics into Japanese. And you know, I just basically listened to him work through everything all my life. So I feel like when it came time to voice, that a lot was already kind of in me, you know what I mean, by just watching him. But yeah, it's a very like intertwined, complicated topic for me that I had to push away from, and you know, but also accept that I am a creative person, that is like, and that is my safe space, that is my religion, you know what I mean. So I've come back to it, but I've gone through, you know, like I feel like I practiced it and so that I could quit,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
There's a very split, yeah, but I'm back.
And then Justine, could you tell us just very quickly about your journey to music?
Yeah, okay, so very quickly, my mother studied music, and that was kind of her safe place. And I have an older sister who is a child prodigy pianist, and she started composing when I was really little, like 4, and so I started composing. But I didn't write any vocal music, which is what I primarily write now, until I was in college, because I was always worried that I didn't understand the poetry. I was always nervous about interpreting the English. Um, so so that started, and then you know, after that, it's been mostly vocal music. Actually, you know, opera, also incorporating. I have a deep love of movies, theater, and TV. I feel like that just kind of brings it all together.
It's wonderful. Well, thank you all for being part of this project and being a part of this panel. I mean, it's always a joy to be with you. I miss you all, and I hope I get to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This was great. Have a good evening, everyone.